Heroes and Adventurers. Today, at the Midnighty Show, I will talk about one of the times I DM'd and how I should have done a session 0 instead of having my first session be a big battle sequence, and how I learned from this session how to further advance my DMing skills. So lean back, grab a drink, and let's dive right into it. This all took place when I was about 13 or 14 and didn't really know how to DM. I would be a classified nightmare DM back then, accidentally railroading, but at least I tried not to. Where we played was back in my garage back then, on a table tennis table where me and my dad had made terrain pieces for our wargaming. I had this session up so that the players would start in a big war zone with what I would believe to be like 80 to 100 miniatures from Game Workshop. I had planned for them to take part of this great battle and make their way towards a magical tower where they had to fight a boss. For context, I saw TTRPGs as video games, which you should rarely do. So it began by me handing over 6 pre-made characters, and sadly I only remember one, because how absurd the character was. It was a goblin bard that had bursted from his mother's womb, dancing, but in the end I think they only chose my cliché, boring characters. I should also clarify and say that the player was my father and sister at the time. This, I should say, is a really bad way to make a normal session, and should have been a session 0 to introduce them to my world. But no, I didn't really know what a session 0 was, or that it even existed. So anyway, they began their adventure by talking to this rugged looking general that led the battle. I got a few missions from him. Their first mission would be to cross the battlefield and take out the enemy artillery that pounded the advance of the good forces. But they had to sneak their way forward. Well, that was what I thought they would do, and had in mind at least. The two heroes made their way through the muddy battlefield, engaging the enemy and helping their fellow soldiers. The battle forward was hard fought, and at one point a rat boss appeared. The arrows flew by, melee weapon clashed, but the foul beast fell in the end. But not without mortally wounding my father, which in close combat with the beast had lost an eye and gotten a huge scar over his face. They pushed forward and began fighting the forces guarding the artillery. Many soldiers fell, but in the end they managed to silence the guns. All of a sudden, a messenger came up to them with an urgent letter. The general had gotten information from the scout he sent out that the enemy forces were only a third of the army they fought, and the rest of the enemy forces were on their way and had to cross a bridge not far from where the artillery was. So the heroes were tasked with setting up explosives, blowing the bridge asunder before the rest of the enemy forces would arrive. They knew the Ratmen would make rafts if the bridge collapsed, but that was valuable time for their side to crush the first force. They tried an old trick. They tossed a coin away from the guard and were able to sneak past, but this would also backfire later. They set up the explosion and lit the fuse. But what they did not expect was that the guard that they tossed the coin to lure away had begun searching for the coin tosser, and when they had lit the fuse, the guard found them. Now fighting ensued, but not only were they fighting 3 heavily armored guards, but also against time. They knew roughly that they had 2 minutes before the whole bridge went kaboom and had to at least escape. They charged and knocked the first guard down, as the 2 other guards still were like 20 meters away, and they began to run. An arrow hit my sister's leg and she fell to the ground, and as the guards moved closer in, she knew this would be the end. Would it not have been for my father rolling a natural 20, they both would have died. Instead, he lifted her, and with inhuman strength and speed flew past the 2 other guards and away into the foggy battlefield. They heard that the fighting had not stopped, even for the heavy fog. But in the heavy fog, my father ran right into a regiment of rats looking for some poor, disoriented human soldiers to kill. He froze, just standing still, with a spine-chilling feeling overtaking him. He saw the Ratmen moving in. Suddenly, a shockwave threw them to the ground. An ear-deafening sound echoed over the field. In that moment, they knew the bridge had been blown to smithereen. In the chaos, the Ratmen fled, and my father rose up, picking my sister back up and carried her to the camp. They were able to fix up the leg somewhat, but not to 100%. She still walked with a little bit of a limp. With little time to lose, the heroes planned an attack against the bridge, which was heavily guarded with elite forces. As the dawn settled and a heavy fog beginning to fill the air, the 2 heroes actually chose to be sneaky with it this time and snuck into a small forest beside the riverbed, not more than 600 meters away from the bridge. thanks to the fog and the sun beginning to set, they made it closer to the bridge by seconds. They finally arrived, and they could see that enemy forces had gotten to the bridge, but hadn't crossed it yet. Instead, they camped just before the bridge's edge. My sister remarked that if they blew the bridge, the water was too deep for the ratmen to cross. Also, the current flow would wash them away if they tried to swim across. They chose to carry on, even though they were tired from the exhausting day, fighting their way through muddy grounds towards the Dark Tower. Once they arrived, they looked at each other and entered the destroyed gates. They were met with darkness. As one of the soldiers lit a lamp, they saw an enormous statue towering inside. They looked around a bit, but suddenly the statue came to life. It gave them a chance not to fight, if they could figure out the riddle. And I'm sorry to say, but I can't really remember the riddle, but they answered wrongly, so the statue attacked them. It slammed its jagged looking sword at them and decapitated one of the soldiers. Whilst my sister tried to shoot at it with a bow, she saw that the arrows got deflected by the skin the statue had. Whilst the statue swung at one of the soldiers, my sister saw something pulsating at the top of the statue's head. She believed it to be a weakness. So the heroes tried to sprint up the stairs, dodging the statue's swings. Battling their way up the stairs, they finally came to a plateau above the statue's head. My sister tried to shoot at the opening, but missed. So in an heroic attempt, my father spent one of his points to do heroic deeds and landed, forcing his sword deep into the crevices of the statue's head. That promptly ended the fight, as it let out an ear-shattering screech. The statue fell into pieces. They had to take a rest after to gain enough strength to finally confront what was summoning the magic at the top. When they got to the top, they saw a rat performing some sacrificial ritual using human captives. This enraged the only soldier that they had left to attack him, but he got pierced by many spears as the mage had bodyguards around him. They fought the bodyguards as they saw how the mage ripped the heart out of the captives and feasted on them in a dark green glowing circle. They confronted the mage and tried to talk to him to no avail. They began their attack on the mage, but the mage was also a skilled fighter, slinging spells and dishing out fast attacks. The mage was able to knock down my father, and as he tried to kill him, my sister shot a specially magic arrow through its skull, making the mage step back in pain and clumsily slip on the blood. The rat mage fell down the tower and hit a sharp rock, getting pierced through his body. As my father and sister stood atop of the tower, they could see how the clouds turned brighter and the fog lifted. When that happened, the humans all charged and routed the first enemy army, slaughtering everything. As it looked like the humans would win, the skies began to form dark clouds with green lightning striking down at the battlefield. Their source came from an old battle-torn tower at the end of the battlefield. The general ordered our heroes to stop whatever was happening and sent them with a squad of 3 elite soldiers to aid them. Sadly, as stated in the first podcast, this is where it ended. The fight between the human army and the second much larger rat force were never played out, and we moved on to a different role-playing game for some time. When we later got back to D&D, I used this as a plot point, the big battle, where 200 years in the future, the new heroes would have to find some artifacts of some sort from this battlefield. I hope you enjoyed my talk. I'll sure to make more, and in the meantime you can go and give me a quick follow on my Instagram, go to my Patreon, donate so I can keep the show alive. Thanks for listening, and as always I will bring you more Midnighter talks.